It's a true pleasure to be here tonight in the presence of Leos Carax. After the Alex trilogy, after Pola X, after Holy Motors, we just witnessed this triumphant piece of cinema, which is Annette. Annette won the Best Director Award. Leos won the Best Director Award in Cannes. He decided to skip the award ceremony anyway, but he can tell us about that later on. And really, Leos Carax, for almost the last 40 years, has gifted us with, in my view, some of the most unique, vibrant, and distinctive, both visual, humanly, politically cinema that, we can witness nowadays in cinema, and I'm not overstating, is simply what I feel. And Leos is also someone that is, his words are very precious and rare. He doesn't make very many public appearances. So we are very grateful to have Leos here at the ICA. To start with Encounters. Your cinema is definitely rooted in humanity and in people, and I was reading also that you don't start usually, or you don't embark on a journey unless you have some special encounters, special connections with some people. So I was wondering, what encounters triggered the genesis of Annette?
I guess I was talking about cinema in general, that obviously you don't make films alone, and if you're not lucky enough to meet the right people, it's very hard. And I was lucky when I was 20, and I was lucky again later. On Annette, obviously, because it's not my project, it's the musicians' project, the band, the Sparks, not the Sparks. Two brothers from Los Angeles. So they proposed that project, so that was the beginning. Yeah, you cannot make films alone. That's you at least need a girlfriend, or a girlfriend and a producer, or 2-3 people. That's how I started. And then you build up, like on this film, some people I knew from before, from my last film, my previous film, and they were, faithful and generous enough. Like the director of photography was there 3 years before the shoot. Same thing with the set designer, my assistant. I need people a long time before I shoot. Just to, because I don't make many films also, so each time I make a film I feel like an imposter. I feel like I didn't study films, I don't know how to make films, so I need to reassure myself and to try things. So that's what I meant, I guess, by, if you want to make films, you need to meet the right people.
And in this case also, I guess the sparks came to you now with the script already, because in this case it's maybe the first time that you didn't write, or with the Pola X as well, you didn't write the script yourself. How did happen the collaboration with the Sparks in that sense for this film?
For this film, that's the first time that I had made a film about 10 years ago, in which I had put, because Sparks, I discovered Sparks when I was a kid, when I was 13 or 14 years old, I guess. And there were 2 records at the time, in the 70s, that were important to me. One is called Propaganda, the other one is called Indiscreet. And these 2 records followed me my whole life. And then I put one song of Indiscreet in this film 10 years ago, and they saw it and they contacted me. And they proposed, like 15 songs that made a sort of plot line, which is still there, basically a stand-up comedian, an opera singer, a baby, and a conductor. And we started from there.
I would like to actually start with the prologue of Annette, because while I was watching the film, I was thinking, that in a sense, I mean, the prologue, you share, like, your presence on screen also in Only Motors. So there is, like, you, in Only Motors, we see you waking up and leading us into another world from your bedroom. And here there is more a descriptive way of somehow starting the show. And I was wondering, like, also in relation to your previous films, the Alex trilogy, as I was mentioning before, why do you decide to make yourself, visible to us, to the audience? And if, there is a connection between Only Motors Prologue and Annette Prologue while you were working on Annette, or that just came, like,
I think it came from two things. One is that when I made Holy Motors, I hadn't made a film for a long, long time. And I think it was a way. I started the film with me, my dog, and my daughter. So it was like a way of reassuring myself, like if I was making a home movie. And these two films, Holy Motors and this film, Annette, are the two, I see them as the two films I've made since I'm a father, which changes everything in a way. So I did the same thing here again. I thought, okay, because we shot the beginning in Los Angeles, I wasn't allowed to bring my dogs, but it was still me and my daughter. And then we passed the film to the Sparks, and then I passed it to Adam and Marion and Simon. So it's a way to reassure myself that we're doing a small experimental home movie, and then handing the film over to fiction.
In a way, it's creating a familiar setting for you, and making a place that it's comfortable to. But in this sense, also there is a relationship with audience, no? At what point you start to think about the audience and who is going to watch your film? Like, because in both prologues, it feels that you are thinking also of the spectator. It's still something that, you start your cinematic, voyage with that idea, or it's something that comes later on during the editing towards the end?
I mean, there's no filmmaker that hasn't been a spectator before. You start as a spectator, basically. You start as if you start experimenting cinema, watching films young, it's because you enjoy this experience of being like an orphan in the dark and being alone with something that's bigger than anything, bigger than your family, bigger. But then when you start making films, I don't think the audience is very abstract. Sometimes you start to think about it. Well, you edit because your editor will say people won't understand that, or so you start to think, oh, people are going to watch this film one day and get panicked. But on Annette, it was different. Maybe it has to do with age also. I don't know, but because the film has so many levels of reality or unreality that you have to think. Well, people are going to accept the fact that everybody's singing all the time. People are going to accept the fact that suddenly a puppet appears and as a baby, and nobody in the film mentions she's a puppet. So there's all what people call the suspension of disbelief is pretty high in Annette. So obviously, it brings. In the film subject, it has to do with the audience anyway. It has to do with what is it to put your bare skin on stage? What is it to try to make people laugh? What is it to try to make people react to music and to a beautiful aria, to the voice, the human voice, etc.
This basically leads me to think that your relationships with, when I say relationships, because I'm also thinking of your previous works, and then in relation to you're working with Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. How, I mean, performativity, Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard have a very different way of occupying space, no? On the screen. The masculinity of Adam Driver is somehow toxic, while there is a sense of, like, you know, ethereal, fragile energy coming off Marion Cotillard. Yet, it's incredible. Their performances are so powerful for different reasons. But I was thinking, how did you, first of all, how painful for you was to decide not to work with Denis Lavande anymore? And how did you come to cast both Adam and Marion, and how was the process of casting for this film?
I hate casting. It's the most unnatural process. It's I mean, it should not be allowed, basically. You see people and you say, you know, you're too big, you're too fat, you're too black, you're too white, you're not pretty enough, you're too ugly. It's very... Usually I try to imagine, what I've always done is imagine films for people, you know, like except when I started, when I was young, when I made my first film, it took me 2 years to find the right actor. This Denis Lavande, I made 3-4 films with him, 5 films later. But once we found an actor that's right for you, you keep him. You know? And then at the time, you know, the girls in the film were my girlfriends, so I didn't have to look for them. But each time I imagined a project without having in mind who would be in it, these projects, I never made them. I could never find these actors later. So when Sparks proposed that to me, I got worried about, you know, being doomed that way, that I would never find. But since it was not my project, it was theirs, it was easier in my head. And actually, Adam was there almost from the beginning, like 7 years ago. And Marion and Simon came much later, like 2 months before the shooting. But it's not the same, you know. In a way, the Sparks, when they proposed me this project, it was a gift. They gave me music. They gave me the English language, you know, which was my first language, but I forgot it living in France all these years. And also they liberated me from that. You know, the fact when you imagine something, it becomes too much in a way. So the fact that, I felt, okay, I choose a boy and I choose a girl. It's more natural than casting.
And speaking of course of the characters of this film, the Annette, you know, I found that the idea of using a puppet for someone that incarnates at some level also exploitation, no? Annette is like, you know, in this society of showing off, society of celebrity, society of consumerism, children are sometimes used as puppets. But I would like to hear from you instead, like, you know, how that became evident and apparent that to cast someone as Annette, the puppet, was like, you know, the right choice. At what stage, at what point of the process?
Well, every project, you know, you can't start. You have to have a few miracles to make a project. A few miracles have to happen, or coincidences that feed into the process. So when I had the Sparks propose this, I thought I started with the music. You know, it's the music I've known since childhood, Sparks music, and I thought, okay, I feel at home with this music. It's time to do a musical. It's time to, which I always wanted to do, work with music. But then I thought, okay, it's nice, but it's impossible because I can't go on casting a baby from 0 to 5 years old who can sing. So then I thought, she cannot be 3D imagery because it's all post-production. There's nothing on the set. There's no baby on the set. And it's not emotional. I need a baby on the set that we can touch and the actors can touch. And then I think, you think of robotics or animatronic. It's also not emotional. And then you go to puppet. I knew nothing about puppets. But in a way, I had no choice. Then you just, I spent 3 years finding the right puppeteers. And then of course it feeds into the movie or not. You go, okay, she's a puppet baby, and the film has to do with manipulation anyway. So, but it's not a choice. The metaphor comes later.
When for a moment, for a couple of questions, I would like to move away from Annette specifically, and I'm sure that some of you might want to go back to the film specifically. But I would like to ask you something in relation to overall your cinematic, language and cinematic vision, because for someone like you that you were 23 years old, 1982 when your first film was released, your first masterpiece, Boy Meets Girl, at Cannes Film Festival. Almost 40 years have passed. You made 6 films, no? In all these years. To me, there are certain reflections that I was doing in preparation of tonight. It's definitely has to do with how costly for you is to put together a script to secure financing, looking for money. That is definitely, I'm sure, an aspect of how painful the cinematic process can become for someone like you, but also how painful it is for you to say, okay, it's done. This is the film that I want. Is also this the reason why, usually your process takes so long, and the way of working on films for you are.
It's hard to answer. I did 3 films between 20 and 30 years old. Then I did 1 film in my 30s, and I think 1 film in my 40s, maybe not even. It's got longer and longer. But it has to do a lot of times with money, sometimes with, I guess, bad reputation.
In which sense? Spending a lot of money.
Yeah, I made a film. I made a film that went way over budget.
Leos is referring to Les Amants du Père, no?
Yeah. So then it was hard to go back to making films, but it's also, as I said, it was casting. If I imagine a film without the casting, a lot of projects I had to abandon. Also, I think it's even if I had all the money I wanted and all the actors I wanted, I think, like Fassbinder made, he died at 36 years old and made 32 films, I think. It would probably take me 2 more centuries to get that. To that level of number of films is something in my nature, I guess. I'm not that inspired, and I don't have that energy that he had. So it's just one. Maybe I could have made a few more films, but that doesn't.
Well, there is one thing that really fascinates me about your cinema, and has to do with the reality also, no? That for a filmmaker like you, of such a rich and imaginific, vision. But I always found your films, even the last 2 that are, much more detached from your personal life, as the Boy Meets Girl, Malasangre, and Les Amants du Pont Neuf could be. There is always an element of reality in your film, and yet your films are, for excellence, the place of imagination, fabulation. Use a word that for me it's very interesting, manipulation, no? To some extent, cinema is always a form of manipulation without any ethical implication, negative ethical implication. But how you reconcile that sense of reality, and I don't want to limit you. I know that you hate Q&As in a sense, so I'm just inviting moral reflections. I'm not expecting an answers per se, but how do you reconcile the sense of rooting your films in reality, in love, pain, life, death, and also this incredible world of dreams, this incredible world of actually fabulation. For me, it's always something that drew me to your cinema, and I see it as a distinctive element of something that can hardly be found in any other director nowadays.
I think the truth is, for me, but I guess it's mostly for many people, is you do what you can. It's not like I had plenty of choices and I said I'm going to do this or that. Each time is I do what I can and I do what I need, unless I have the. That's why also I make maybe a few films. Is I cannot make a film if I feel I'm the same person who made a film before. And then I get the need or not of a project. If it holds, if it becomes more than a need, let's say, and if all these miracles I talked about, all these coincidences that make a project, it's inside a kind of tunnel, and you have to go through this tunnel, and hopefully there's some kind of freedom at the end of the tunnel, something liberating, and to make it, that makes a film. And you don't really choose either, it's not a question of choosing, let's say I'm going to make a musical, I'm going to make an action film, I'm going to make a comedy, whatever. I never think like that. I have to, all these, I call it chance, luck or miracles. All these things have to add up, and at the point where you say, I need to do this, and do I find these people to help me do this? And if I do, and the money, then I have to forget that I don't know how to do anything and just go ahead and do it.
So films that come out of necessity, but also you leave traces, for yourself. Because, for example, I'm thinking now, while you were talking about, I'm not thinking about making a musical, but then in Holy Motors there is that beautiful gift of a sequence with the Kylie Minogue, which is a musical within the film, in a way is leaving traces for yourself, and then 10 years later you are somehow following up with a more expanded version, or the same for your initial part of your career, with all that investigating your own life, personal life, love relationships. There were these three films that came all out of that sort of stage of your life. So it's fascinating, I guess.
Well, there are things that like music obviously has been a big regret in my life. I think I would have liked a life in music. I think the most beautiful lives are the people who live in music, musicians or singers or composers. I can't imagine anything more. Yeah, but I played music when I was a kid. I wasn't good, so music rejected me. Then later, when I was 16, 17, I discovered cinema. I went there, and I felt at home there, but I was still missing music. So my whole approach, I think, to cinema has been musical. I have to feel like, it's a revenge. I feel like I'm composing something. And slowly I approached music in different films. But I always thought I could not make a musical film because I'm not a composer. And again, how do you talk about, how do you create music if you're not a composer? How do you? And if you ask a composer to work on your film, what happens if you don't like their music? You know, they're going to send you music, and you're going to how are you going to talk about it? What are you going to say? You know, change it from major to minor, or change this chord for this chord. I didn't know. You know. But with Sparks, I was lucky because, as I said, it was like a home to me, this music from childhood. So the dialogue was very simple.
But in terms of process, you did not work like, you know, with sound, like, you know, you were cutting the film, like, you know, because you created the music from original, no? The music that for this film, for Annette. Did you create, like, you know, the songs, like, you know, part of the song as also, as you were going along, you were recording with Adam and Marion Cotillard, like, you know, as they were acting, right?
No. We started with, you know, they sent me like 15 songs, and 12, 15, 20, I forgot, demos, let's say, with a few, telling a basic story. And then we started from there, and then I would ask for another song for, you know, I would start to write lyrics. They would send something, and I would say, oh, I like this part more than this part, and then it would go back, and it was an exchange. But because we couldn't find the money, we had time. We had 7 years to do it, so we probably wrote 80 songs. Half of them are in the film. So it was, and because Sparks is so, these two brothers, so humble and very fast and very inspired, and they live in the bubble, the pop fantasy bubble. They do that every day. They meet every day and make music for the last 50 years or 50 years, I guess. Yeah. So it was quite. I was surprised how simple it was.
Amazing. Is there any questions coming from you?
Thanks. Hi, Les. Love the film. I don't know if you remember, but I was one of the singers in the Liège thing in the first stand-up, and my dad was actually the guy in the red bow tie who was shouting in the second stand-up, and I think he originally had the line, "That's not funny, Henry," that I think you dubbed in the end with your own voice. So my question is, as a way of making that up to my dad, will you sign one of these copies of the soundtrack that I brought with me? Because he's going to be devastated when he sees the film.
So, I'm sorry. I like to dub people in my films. But
is that a yes?
Yeah.
Thanks. Is there a less utilitaristic? No, I'm joking. Fair enough. There's another question. Yes, here at the front. Then we go at the back as well.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. The sequences with stand-up comedy, I mean, to me this is a very difficult kind of form to construct in an authentic way if you're not a stand-up comedian. So just wondering, and I saw like the thanks that Adam Driver gave on the credits at the end. So just wondering how you and he worked together to create this kind of avant-garde deconstruction maybe of stand-up comedy.
Well, I guess creating Henry was the biggest work because obviously there was no sense of what comedy he was making. In his demos, and there was no sense of his fall from grace while he stopped having success. So all that was a lot of work. And I knew a little about stand-up comedy. I knew nothing about opera, but I've always liked the idea of stand-up comedy or some, Lenny Bruce, Bill Hicks, Harry Kaufman. I knew a bit about it, and how. Then I found more, but I read biographies or other biographies. How some, it seems to me just the bravest or craziest thing to do, to go on stage and think you have to make people laugh. to me, it's like, nightmares from childhood when you go to school and you find out you're naked. Or I don't see who would want to do that. And some stand-up comedian, vomit before they go on stage. They're so panicked. In the beginning, the whole film was supposed to be sung, so I tried to imagine these two shows. It seemed impossible. First of all, it's impossible to invent a stand-up comedian because there's so few in history that are great. I could not invent. So I decided, okay, not everything is going to be sung, and he's not going to be. What I'm going to show is not a stand-up comedy show. It's going to be about him and about what it is to do comedy. So it doesn't need to be funny, really. And then I had very little time to work with Adam, but we did, I never rehearsed, but we did rehearse these two shows one afternoon each, just to find. I didn't know him. Adam, I said he was there from 7 years back, but we met a few times, but we didn't never work together, and so we needed to, I guess, to try things. So also I was discovering how he moves, how he holds a mic. I had to check a few things. So, but once I decided it didn't have to be sung and it didn't have to be funny, I was very, liberated.
I would like to go at the back as well. Raise a hand there, and then we come at the front.
Thank you. I found the film really, really moving. I was wondering, what was the post-production process like on this film? I noticed there's certain bits of CG, but then I can imagine re-recording the music and getting the sound mix right. I'm really interested to hear what that process was like for you on this film.
So I like editing. I've always liked editing. But I don't like post-production too much. Concerning the puppet, I try to limit it as much. The only post-production is erasing the puppeteer so you don't see them. I'm sorry. And there was a sequence for which we had no money, which is the Hyperbole stadium sequence, where suddenly I had to do everything in post-production. There was nothing. There was a puppet and there was Adam in it, and a few Belgian pom-pom girls and a few Belgian fake American football players. No sets, no nothing, so it was the first time I had to do that. But because, once again, we were in this suspension of disbelief that it was so, I didn't mind doing it for this film, which had another degree of something artificial. Or in terms of music, it was all live singing, and a few times we had to, like on the motorcycle, because the wind and the motorcycle, we couldn't keep the live singing, but very few things like that.
Before coming at the front and continuing with the questions, to stay a bit on post-production, I'm sure that the pandemic for you was a blessing in disguise, no? Because you had 1 more year after Cannes 2020 to continue to work on the editing process. I know that for you the editing process, it's an important part that you love, and where a lot of ideas come through. And I would like to hear from you about this process in particular, also because in the room we have someone that about editing knows 1 or 2 things, since that we have Walter Murch that caught the conversation and Apocalypse Now, and I would like then to hear maybe from Walter if he wants to comment on anything about this film or just to hear your point of view. But first I would like Leos to tell us about the editing and this bonus of having a bit more time with Nelly, to refine.
Yeah, well, COVID.
What to say?
Well, we were supposed to be finished when the COVID.
It was going to Cannes, no? Cannes 2020.
Yeah. So of course it was. I didn't feel the film was finished. I needed more time, so that was good. But apart from that, obviously COVID was not a great thing. It's still not. And then there's the, something you don't think about before it happens, which is the release of a film. Then you have the feeling that, you have the feeling that COVID was invented by Amazon and the platforms.
Amazon, you mean the one that produced the film?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I mean,
it's a dream.
We can quote that.
It's a dream for platforms, basically what COVID and these people want is to keep you at home. So,
for sure.
That's the story of COVID and Annette.
It's a love-hate relationship. Could we bring the mic to Walter? Maybe even just to say hi.
Yes, absolutely wonderful. Such a totally unique vision in this in the world that we find ourselves in at the moment. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there any more questions? No, we have to come at the front for sure. Yeah. There is so much that we could talk about masculinity and toxicity. So,
hi, I'm sure it's a very bizarre question, but I'd read that you're good friends with Claire Denis, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, perhaps, and how you'd met, and if she's ever given you any advice that had a big impact on you, perhaps. And it's very, very weird, but just big cinephile.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Claire Denis what?
So I've read that you're very good friends with her, and I was wondering if you could talk about perhaps how you met and if she's ever given you any advice that was, had a big part in your career.
She gave me advice?
Yeah.
We met, I forgot, it was, we met, but I don't know many filmmakers. I know very few filmmakers actually, but we shared a few actors, a few shared assistants. That's how I guess we got to know each other. What can I say?
You don't have to say anything at all. You're just interested. That's all.
She's preparing a film, that's all I know right now. So good luck to her.
No, thank you.
At the very back, there is someone who is very keen on asking a question.
Thank you so much. That was great. I was wondering how you feel watching the film back now, and whether you're happy with it. And actually, do you think you can ever really enjoy your own work?
So I don't see my films once I finish them. That's one thing. But I'm proud of the film. Yeah. That's a good thing when you don't watch them again. You can imagine they're great. And if you watch them again. But it was also the case with the film before. I was. Some films before that I was disappointed, which has nothing to do with how good or bad the films are. I don't think it's something more the way you live, or the expectations, or your life at the time, or whatever happens. Doesn't always have to do with the film itself. But yeah, I think I'm proud of the film. Because I don't know why. Because of music, because of trying to make a personal film, although it's kind of a bigger film for me. With actors. Actors out of my circle, yeah.
Thanks. One more year.
Hello. This might sound like a slightly convoluted question, but at what point in your career did you, because in the Q&A, necessity seems to be like a really big theme. So at what point in your career did you relinquish control over the creative process to the necessity of actually creating a film? Or is there anything you can comment on that as a director?
Sorry, just the beginning again. I missed the beginning.
In the beginning I said that in this Q&A, necessity is a recurring theme of how, for example, the puppet, the theme of the puppet, for me, like to let the puppet be the child is actually a big creative decision, but you seem to have just let it go and let the necessity do its creative part. So when did you start doing that in your career? When did you let go in that sense?
I think I felt, because of what I said, because I started young and I had never been on a set before. I made a film. It did happen a bit that way, which is, I get cornered. I get to the point where there's no choice. That's one way of work with it. I work out of chaos, and I have to find people. That's what I was talking about. It's so important to meet 2-3 people to make a film. I need people who both kind of understand my chaos, but who have precision. So that's how it seems to me films have happened. But to get to that point, before that, there's this desire, this idea that you have a project, you have something you need to do before everything, before you meet the people. And how do you get there? It's very mysterious. I don't know. It's what I know is that I got there sometimes and I had to abandon the project for money reasons or casting or whatever. And I can never go back. Once you make a film, everything you thought of before, everything is dead. So you have to feel, if you want to make a new film, that you've moved away from the old self in a way, either through experience in life or whatever. That's for me, of course. Maybe that's why I make so few films also.
Leos, in this sense, I would like to ask a question that is something that I saw rewatching your films recently. Again, this rooted in reality, this sense of linking and connecting your films to your own life or something real. You talk about also being realistic, realism. Did you ever think, or it's something, somewhere in you, the idea of making also a work of non-fiction? Would this be, or the idea of editing forever, it's too haunting for you, that it's something that...
Make non-fiction film?
Yeah. For that sense of attachment to reality, that is so strong for you.
Many times I thought of that, but I don't think it's for me. I don't think... the thing is, yeah, basically, if you make a documentary, when I make a fiction film, what ends it is money. At one point, producers want the film. They take, they say, enough. You have to finish shooting. You can't retake every shot. You can't re-edit everything. It's finished. So, and you accept that rule. Because if you don't accept it, you can't go on making films. With a documentary, I don't see how you would stop. I mean, if you're going to film whatever reality, the reality is going to go on. So why stop? So each time I thought of a documentary, I thought, I'm going to spend my whole life doing this and that. No.
It would be an infinite project of your life, imagine. Okay.
But usually, if I'm interested in something, I try to put it back into my fiction films.
Yeah. Which in a way, it's the beginning of Annette, no? It's you. It's reality. I saw it as a piece of non-fiction within a huge fiction structure.
I don't know.
Any more questions? Yes. Okay, you have a mic. Thank you. Yes.
I heard you say you were trying to feel at home with the music or the movie, but I really struggled during the film to find a place, because either you're in the audience and you're sort of the mass audience, and on top of that you're the mass audience after the projection, and then there's a big sort of violent, loving some male character, really difficult to identify. Then there's a puppet, and I was just wondering what made you feel at home during the film. Where did you find your space? And I know there's sort of demiurge, sort of creator, etc., all the poetry. That it's really challenging as an audience to sort of be in the film, and until the little girl sings, and there's a band coming out at the end after the titles, and you feel like maybe a part of the gang as well. But it's difficult to find a place, really.
I think at home doesn't mean feeling comfortable. What I call at home is, I think you make films. When I was talking about, where I was asked how does a project happen? How does a film happen? I was trying to express this thing of you get to a point where you need to do it, but it's a point. It's not a point of with answers. It's a point where you feel that maybe the fears, all the fears and all the doubts and all the questions you have are there, and then you decide, okay, I go there or I don't. But and that's how I make films. That's why when people ask me what my films are about, I have I have really no way to answer. I think I make films about something, really. Some people see things, and that's okay. So obviously, when I go home, again, it's not some space of reassurance. It's some space where I feel I can explore, something that I would say inward, and something that outward, something personal, and something that I think is happening, or I feel it is happening around, and to connect these two movements, inside and outside.
I have actually another curiosity. In your relationship with the cinema and cinephilia, Leos, in his early 20s, maybe some of you already know, but was a film critic, no? I think for Cahiers du Cinéma as well. And I guess you wrote about cinema extensively and you watched a lot of films, but then I also read that at some point, sometime you stopped watching films. And I was wondering if this fractured relationship with the cinema was coming out of your own creative process as a filmmaker, whereas, you stopped having time, literally, practically, and emotionally, to watch other people's work, or was a fracture that was somehow triggered by something along the way of encountering cinema that made you, as a cinephile, walking away?
I don't see myself. No, I was not a critic. I was, for 6 months when I was 18, I wrote like 5 articles. That's my career in criticism. But I was not good. at it. It's not my thing. I did watch many films from 16 to probably 24, 25 years old. When I arrived in Paris, a lot of silent films, but not only, of course, American, Russian, New Wave, French films, etc. But when I finished my second film, I felt I had seen enough, or it was almost too much, and then in my head, these films, I don't really need to see them again. They're there. So, not the plots or anything, but in terms of cinema. So I feel very hypocrite because I push people to go to theaters, but I don't. So, I do think theaters are very important. If we lose them, we're dead. But the truth is, I don't go. I find them depressing. But that's probably because
you find depressing the building itself, the way of presenting
the
films,
candies, the smell, everything depressing. But I think that's because they were so important to me when I got to Paris and I was alone. I didn't know anybody.
Sure.
So it's like you don't go back to an old lover.
Good. Is there time for a last question? Please. Yeah, we can go just in the middle and then we wrap it up.
Oh, thank you, Alice. Really love your movie, and I can see that you use a lot of elements of theater inside your film. So I really want to know your ideas about the relationship between stage and screen. Yeah, that's my question.
The relationship between stage and screen.
That's another gift, sparks, with the music and the English language and etc. In a way, I don't think I would have thought of stage filming. What is a stage? What is a curtain? What is a backstage? What is performing? If they hadn't proposed this project, then I got interested, because I don't see live things. I can't see theater or dance or opera. I don't know why, but live things make me. I'm afraid they're going to fall, or they're going to forget their text, or I don't like the light. There's too much light, or you can see your neighbor before the show. I like, when I liked it, I like cinema theaters where it's dark and you're alone. And so in a way, and I know nothing about stage, but I got interested in it because of Sparks, because of this project thing. Then I got very interested in it, and also because there were these two different words, opera and stand-up, which you could oppose completely, but there are also things in common. But I don't think I make any specific statement about that, but it was interesting it's like, let's say, I find it very hard to film rich people. So in this film I had to film rich, famous people, which is even harder. I did it once, but it was a film 20 years ago, which is the only other film I didn't imagine myself. I adapted from a novel, and he was rich and famous, the character. And I find it hard today. It's been done, of course, a lot in cinema. Let's say Douglas Sirk in the 50s, the beautiful films where rich, famous people could be like gods, in Greek tragedy. And today you can't do that anymore. So why am I talking about that? I don't know. I forgot.
It was beautiful.
Because I was saying, rich people like performers, and that's something I would have imagined myself. I had to do it. It was there. That's how the project started, and I got interested in it.
Leos, thank you so much. It was an honor. It's an understatement to say that, but please join me in thanking Leos Carax.